wasit.com.
Hello there, I'm hoping this will be a quick one. I'm recording this on, I think it's Friday 13th, great. I'm a bit silly, even though I'm not religious, there's that bit at the back of my mind, bad luck, which is completely, I know logically, that's just nonsense, but it's, however logic you are, perhaps everybody has a bit of superstition, which is why probably religion flourishes so well. Anyway, let's start today. It's a quickie. It's about this Enoch Powell play on Radio 4 that'll be broadcast on Saturday. This Saturday, I forget the date. Is it the 16th? I think it's either 15th or 16th of April 2018. I'm just walking the dogs, by the way, so you might hear the background noise. Now, I'm just slightly sleeping, a bit wound up, because I wake up and I find a lot of nice white middle class people are offended by this. Very kind of them, and they want it banning, because for some reason they all believe that anyone who listens to this are so stupid will suddenly become racist. Now, first of all, it's Radio 4 on a Sunday. I think it's a Sunday, not Saturday. It's quite. I normally listen to Radio 4, but Sundays it's a bit of the dullest day going. I mean, it's really not the most exciting day. During the week you get comedy and stuff, which is always worth listening to. But this play, which is apparently on 8 o'clock, I can't imagine would have got many listeners anyway. And we're talking about Radio 4, middle class, quite lovers. It's not tended to be listened to by racists or anything like that. You know, the thickos usually don't listen to Radio 4 because it's a bit highbrow. So that's the first thing. The second one is all these, and I've seen politicians say it. Now, I won't name him, but there's a few politicians who are moaning about this, wanting it banned. So what they're saying is that you, the listener, are too stupid. You'll basically become a racist if you listen to this. So they've got very little respect for the vote, haven't they? So why are they politicians? You know, it's just that's offensive. Plus they're all white middle class, most of them. In fact, I've only seen one who isn't white moaning. And that person, well, I didn't even look at the profile, I just quickly looked on the Twitter page. I think it declares she researches Enoch Powell. That's what she's studying at uni. So you'd imagine she'd be into wanting people to listen to it, not wanting it blocked. But apparently, I mean, one can only presume she must think that she's more superior to everyone else, and that everyone else can't cope. See, things like this are actually indirectly racist themselves, because saying that us thickies are too stupid to listen to things like this. Otherwise, why would you fear it? I mean, why would you fear anyone listening to anything? Now, I'm just going to go on to, and I've nearly come to the end. I get sick of people trying to ban things in this sort of belief that we're all thickies. And by the way, there aren't actually that many racists in the UK when you look at it. I'm sick of people saying that England's full of racists when they're not. The racist parties, and I won't name them, but you know them, have very few members. If anything, they decrease the members over time. The members they have aren't particularly academics or anything. It doesn't really attract many. And if you go to the areas where all these, you see, the trouble is, these, like I say, are white middle class. Often they actually don't mix with any other community. Once a year they might go along to some sort of reggae event or something. I think once a year in London there's one of them carnivals, and I think often they go to one of them and maybe get something ethnic, and they feel they're really right on. In reality they probably never meet anyone the rest of the year. So they presume everybody, so they guess at everything, they presume things, which is what racism is. It's a presumption without knowing the facts. So instead of actually realising that, most council estates, if you go down, you get a lot of mixed families. People aren't racist. Years ago, when I was in the 70s, there was tendency to be less mixing. I mean, people didn't mix like they do now. But in those days, what you found was people weren't even then really racist. What it was, and I've said this before, with the poor coming across from other countries, it was a snobbish thing. People weren't actually anti them. They were actually anti the poverty side. They didn't want people moving in next door to them because it lowered the house value. And the jokes were, at the time, quite nasty jokes. But I remember as a child people telling me them. They'd make jokes about how you'd have hundreds of people in one house. But in today's world, all these families have progressed and got money, and people aren't bothered anymore. The mix, unlike a few years ago where they were sort of locked into sort of communities so no one mixed. These days, streets are mixed. You don't have that sort of closed network as you once did. Now you do have it a bit in schools, and that can be a problem. For instance, you can go to even in city centres, certain schools, and most of the children are either white or maybe Asian or whatnot. There is a problem there, and because of that you don't get the exposure. I mean, when I was a kid, there was only one lad at school I ever met who was Asian. He was a nice lad. He was Sikh, if I remember. Used to go to his house. His mum made lovely these banana things, were gorgeous. But that was it. That was the only family. If it hadn't been for him, I don't think I'd have exposed myself to anyone. It was only when I got to, I think, 21, when I went to college, I met 4 Asian girls, and the moment I met them, I thought, oh, I better be careful what I say, not to offend. Thinking, oh well, because they were from different religions, Muslim, Sikh, blah blah blah. And you know something? I've never heard so much swearing. Every other word was an F word. I mean, we got on great. They were like sisters to me in the end. In fact, very quickly would hang about. They were hysterical. I think they were the only ones hanging about with in college. In fact, there was one other lad, I think, if I remember. But to be honest, it was those 4. They were just hysterical. I'd be crying with laughter. They were just so funny. And you see, you know, I admit it, up to that point I presumed that if a girl was from an Asian family she'd be strict and all this. They weren't. So I mean, that's the trouble, you see, is when you don't get exposed, you see people on TV, you get one impression. It's a bit like a lot of times when you see Imran, I probably pronounced that wrong, on TV. They usually interview the beardy weirdy jerks, and in reality a lot of Imrans are really nice, if I'm saying that right. Imran, I'm probably not, sorry. But the truth is, people aren't really racist, and people aren't, they're less racist than ever these days, because everyone mixes. So let's stop living in this fear and presuming that everyone's stupid and can't listen to anything, because they're not. I mean, there's this girl put on, oh, I'm living in fear of something of this show going out. Seriously, what do you think's going to go wrong? I mean, do you really think that Monday there's going to be a lot of racists out there? Seriously. I mean, the reality is there's very few. People say things nasty. I'm going to say this. Doesn't mean they're racist, it just means they're jerks. People say things on purpose. If they're in a confrontation, I've seen it happen, they will say things that are going to offend somebody, just to get a reaction, because they know it hurts. That's human nature. Doesn't mean that deep down they're really bothered. I mean, most people will not get up and care less. It gets more complicated in many ways. We keep just labelling everyone as a racist. People have views on different things. some is religion, some is other bits, some is just, I mean, often, and one of the things I've noticed is there's a lot of, we've got to remember that in the UK there's a lot of areas that are white only, and where people only mix, not because they're meaning to, it's just that some people all their lives will never leave the town or street they live in. I've known people who've just never left, gone outside the street in fact, and if they're not working, they're not going to be mixing. If they've never met anyone at school, and then the rest of their life all they ever meet is about 3 or 4 people, which may sound silly, but for some people that actually can happen. They might only meet their own family or a few friends in the street. They won't go on holiday because they don't have the funds. They won't even go outside. They feel safe, and after a while it's a safety, you know, they feel uneasy about leaving their own area. And so you do find, bizarrely, a lot of people do not mix. And so that can be the problem. I mean, in the past, what they used to do with the churches, because my nan told me this, they'd take people out to the seaside and stuff, and that would help get people sort of out of there. And one good thing, and I'll say this, that I've noticed, I think it was the last year, the year before, I was reading that some of the Muslim communities are doing that. They're taking all the locals, I don't just mean Muslims, I mean everyone, and putting them on the bus, and I think they're doing it with some Christian church as well, and going out and taking families out for the day, taking them away from that sort of closed set. And that's what you need to do. But this presumption when you have middle class, oh by the way, you know what's really offensive isn't Enoch Powell's speech, it's these white middle class, and I've seen them do it on they'll say it on Question Time. I've seen them say it several times, Labour and Conservative, and quite often it's Labour who'll come out with actually what I'd say is a modern day speech of hate, which is they'll say 2 things I've noticed, I mean, amongst other things. The first one is they'll say things like the Polish are here on purposely to work to charge less, to force local workers down, and that produces hate. Hang on. Sorry. Sorry, just letting people pass. That produces hate because it feeds this sort of belief that Polish or whatnot are simply forcing wages down, when they're not. I mean, many actually charge the same, if not more, than the locals. It's just that they work maybe quicker and get things done quicker. But without any facts, these MPs, and I've seen them say it quite a few times, will go on TV and blab this rubbish out. No evidence. I've never seen anyone produce any evidence of it. Oh, maybe it does happen, but you know, I've known people who've actually hired Polish workers to build for them, and they're not charging any less. They just do a very good job. So, you know, but yet they can go on TV and say this, which I'd say is a modern day racist thing to say. And the second one I've seen, both Labour and Conservatives, and Labour have said this quite a bit, so don't suddenly go there suddenly not racist or anything. They'll come out with, and I've seen it again on Question Time, they'll say things like Muslim women are forced by men to cover their heads or faces or whatnot. Well, that actually, I'm not sure it's even been proven. It might happen, but you know, there's other reasons, and I've met Muslim women who they wear it, their parents don't wear it, but they choose to because the grandparents wore maybe a head veil covering their head, and it, you know, the hair, and they do it actually because it makes them feel comforted, because it's something that the family did. I mean, they're not, sometimes it's not even religious reasons. Some do it for religious reasons, some do it for any reasons. There's many reasons why women, and it's not every single Muslim woman, it's only a few, cover their hair, and to be honest, the ones that cover their face, I've only ever seen 1 or 2 in the country, It's very rare. You do see a few, but there's so few. Okay, just someone else passing there. So that's basically my little speech about that. I wasn't going to say that much really, but people do get... Oh, I'll tell you one last thing as well. Years ago, I remember listening to a certain DJ, a really nice bloke. He's on a lot of stations. He was talking about, I think he's one of his friends, and he said, and I'll say the phrase, he was talking about he was both deaf and dumb. Now, if anyone doesn't know, the well, you know what deaf means, can't hear. Well, dumb is an expression where, and okay, it might be not the most nicest of expression, but often refers to people who can't speak. And I think maybe there's a more modern version, but quite honestly, I don't even know what it is. I've never really. It's very rare you hear anyone talk about people can't speak anyway. So I'm not sure what the politically correct expression is. But anyway, everyone started phoning in, giving him grief, saying, "Oh, you're wrong, and it's disgraceful, and how dare you?" And then he kept saying, because he was quite clearly upset, he kept saying, "Well, I'm sorry, is it your friend or relative who's got this condition?" And they would then reply, "No, I don't know anyone who's got it. They just were offended on behalf of others." And that's the trouble with this modern day thing, is everyone's getting offended on behalf of people they don't even know. They've not even been told to be offended. And then when it turns out, people then turn to them and say, "But I'm not offended, I've got this condition, how dare you? How dare you speak on my behalf?" I mean, obviously, if you can't speak, you know what I mean, that's not the correct thing to say, is it, I guess. But if you understand what I'm saying, is that many people feel that they have the correct right and knowledge to speak on behalf of others and be offended. And again, this is what it comes down to on this Enoch Powell thing. You've got a lot of white people, middle class, who are offended. You know, I've seen them tweet it. They use the word "I am offended." Now, I'm not sure you can be or have the right to be offended. In what way? I mean, this play hasn't even gone out yet, so no one's even heard it. It reminds me of that opera, that quite good opera in the end actually. I wasn't even going to watch it. It sounded rather dull. And because of the hoo-ha from all the Christians saying, "Ban it, ban it, ban it," I watched it, and I bet that got thousands of millions of viewers. I mean, often when I'm thinking of this, is this, I mean, part of me wonders, is this really publicity stunt by the BBC to generate a lot of listeners for a play that probably won't get many people? It reminds me of there was an episode, and I often find it's worth referring to, of Father Ted, where he stands outside the cinema demonstrating against a film, and instead of putting people off, he gets even more people going. And yet no one ever learns this lesson. The more you demonstrate, the more publicity something gets. And so one suspects this radio play will be getting a lot of listeners. People record it and replay it worldwide. Be downloaded like crazy. There'll be pirated copies. It'll be going around the world. People who've never heard of Enoch Powell will be listening now in every country in the world. You just created... he'll end up being a celebrity. People then be over-analysing everything he said or in the play. People be looking him up. I mean, it's bizarre. So in the end, rather than them shutting this thing down, all you're doing is generating more views. But anyway, that's just, I'm surprised I talked so much about it on this one. So that's it. You might agree, you might not, but don't sit there and think that you're smug. And this is one thing that absolutely ticks me off, is that just because you sit there and you think you're smart ass and you're going, "Oh, I'm offended," doesn't mean you're better than others. It just means you're not very bright, because you haven't thought, you haven't listened to it. You know, if you'd listened to this play and then it was offensive, fine, say it then complain. Say they shouldn't have gone out if it is offensive. We don't know. It hasn't even gone out, and yet you're claiming you're offended. You're offended. How the hell can you be offended? If somebody wrote a book, would you be offended? I mean, I'm sure there's books about Enoch Powell. Are you asking the book libraries to burn them? There's, you know, do we have to burn things because somebody's offended? They used to burn books years ago, if you remember. You remember what party did that? You know, is that what you want to associate yourself with, that party? Isn't it amusing? The ones that claim to be so right on want to repeat what certain party did in Germany around the 40s. Yeah, think about it.